right, okay, so we have rotated slightly to avoid the sun, but I think it's still gonna start hitting me here shortly, so please ignore that. Hey everyone, Marissa here and welcome back to another video. Today I am very excited because we actually get to film a reading wrap-up video. When was the last time I got to do that? So today we're gonna be talking about all of the books that I read in Q2 of 2025, which was a grand total of 10 books. Who knew she could still do that? Go me. So between the months of April and June 2025, I was able to read 10 books, which breaks down to 6 volumes of manga, because yes, manga does count as reading, 2 novels, which honestly is the thing I am most astonished by, because if you have hung around these parts at all the last couple of years, you know I'm having an atrocious time completing a novel. And then 2 nonfiction works, which actually technically I didn't read in their entirety in Q2, I just finished them, but whatever, that still counts. So basically, as you do in a wrap-up video, I'm gonna give like little mini reviews. I'm not gonna go super in-depth on everything I read, simply because I don't think it all warrants the most in-depth review, but also because I am still trying to find my reviewing feet because it has been a while since I've done this. Let's start off easy here and talk about the manga that I read, because all 6 volumes were a continuation of the Elusive Samurai series by Yusei Matsui, which I have been reading all year long. And in case you've missed videos where I've talked about this previously, the Elusive Samurai follows a young boy named Tokiyuki, who is essentially the last remaining heir to the Hojo dynasty in historical Japan. His family was essentially massacred so that somebody else could assume power, and he is basically on this journey to like grow, gain strength, gain confidence, and take back his rightful kingdom. We are finally at this point, because I've read now through volume 9, we are finally getting into like the meat of the action. A lot of the early volumes are him kind of like gathering comrades, if you will. The main character Tokiyuki, he's like 10 in the series. He's been gathering his friends who are also kind of around his age. I think the oldest of the kids, the main character kids, are 14 years old, I believe. So he's been gathering other kid allies, he's been gathering adult allies, he's been plotting and practicing his skills and working on his archery and all that. And now we're finally into him starting to take steps towards achieving his ultimate goal of retribution for his family. I have read some of these previously, but I honestly could not tell you for the life of me what volume I stopped at, because I was reading this serialized on the Viz Media app. So I was reading it chapter by chapter, and I'm honestly not sure like what volume I got up to yet. So far, I don't think we've hit that point. Most of this is vaguely familiar at least, but I am very excited to start getting into like new stories so that I can be mind blown if something shocking happens. So basic summary, still really enjoying this series, kind of pacing myself at this point. Volume 15, I think, is the last one that has been published and translated. So I am trying to now pace myself so that I don't get into the point where I'm literally having to just like wait for a new release, because I am very bad at doing that. That was not my forte as a kid when I was reading a ton of manga, and let me tell you, I have not developed that skill in my old age now either. To talk briefly about the nonfiction that I read, the first book that I finished in Q2 was I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, and this is the 2nd edition of the book. And this is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It is kind of a personal development, personal finance book, and it's the first book of this sort that I've actually read. I have been recommended other personal finance books in the past, and I know there are a ton out there, but I'm really glad that I decided to do I Will Teach You to Be Rich as my personal first foray into this topic, simply because it was literally the most non-alarmist, approachable take to personal finance that I probably could have hoped for. If you are just trying to get a handle on your finances and you don't even really know where to start, I would definitely recommend this book, because he goes over everything from like base level, like how to open a savings account, what banks you should be talking to or looking at, how to get loans, how to pay off debt, how to start planning for like a bigger, brighter future. And his whole thing is to basically identify, what does he call it? Your rich life. So identify what a rich, fulfilling life means to you, and from that goal you can then like figure out the steps, financial steps to get there. So very approachable, very, again, like I said, non-alarmist, and I think a very good book for somebody who, like me, is in their early 30s and had a basic understanding at least going in, but has felt like this book really helped me kind of like level up my understanding and what I should be doing to plan for the future. Then the other nonfiction book that I finally finished in Q2 was Ron Chernow's Alexander Hamilton biography. And I have to say that this was just so incredibly good. I feel like I might have screwed up my presidential biography challenge simply because I don't know that anything else will live up to this standard. I should caveat this by saying I still have not figured out how to review a biography, but genuinely, I cannot convey enough how much this just reads like an adventure novel or a historical fiction book. The way Chernow writes is so incredibly engaging and also so accessible that I genuinely didn't really want the book to end, which is why I dragged it out for so long. This book is obviously also famously tied to the Tony Award-winning musical by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I feel like there's nothing else I should really need to say about Alexander Hamilton or this book because it has so permeated the cultural zeitgeist in a way that I could say that very few other historical biographies have, but genuinely this was just set such an incredibly high bar for all of the biographies going forward. I think it was a very well-rounded biography as well. Like when I read the Walter Isaacson, Ben Franklin biography, I really felt like it overly honed in on, say, like weird personal quirks of Ben Franklin, whereas I feel like this biography of Hamilton was very thorough in terms of his personal life, his childhood, his personal relationships, his relationship with his family, his friendships, his studies, his work, like all of it got equal weight in a way that I feel formed a very full portrait of the person. I will also say that if you are intimidated by reading physically chunky books, the audiobook version of this is absolutely fantastic. It was just so very, very good. And it makes me very happy that the George Washington biography that I picked was also by Ron Chernow. For a brief update on that, I have finally started George Washington, the Chernow biography, and I can only hope that it will prove to be as good as Hamilton was. And obviously I saved the best to last. Let's talk about the novels that I read in Q2 of 2025, starting off with The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa, translated into the English by Stephen Snyder. And I just have to say that I am so incredibly glad that I gave this one as many chances as I did. Now, for context, I have owned this book since probably 2015, and I have tried to read it at least 3 times before and never got past the second chapter. So I genuinely cannot tell you what was different this time, except that I decided I wasn't going to put it down. I was going to give it a good shot. And by chapter 4, I was completely sucked in. This novel is about a young, unnamed housekeeper who gets a new assignment from her agency to go take care of the house of this kind of eccentric old gentleman who we basically just know as the professor, who, as it turns out, cannot remember anything for more than 80 minutes at a time. Sorry, I had to reference my notes there. Obviously, this creates unique challenges if he has basically an internal reset button due to a traumatic brain injury suffered during a car accident. He remembers her for 80 minutes and then they start all over again. Obviously, this has been tricky for other housekeepers, and he is also a very eccentric math professor who basically only wants to talk about math and numbers and not to be disturbed while he's doing his thinking time. So she has to kind of adapt to this very interesting, very insular world that he has formed for himself, while also taking care of him and trying to like learn from him a bit at the same time. She also happens to be a single mother to a son with a rather flat head, which leads him to being nicknamed Root by the professor because his head reminds him of a square root symbol, which I thought was very cute. And if you'll indulge me to just read to you directly from my personal notes after reading this book, as the housekeeper's appreciation for math increases and her family becomes intertwined with the professor, they all learn a little bit about life, family, and the inherent truths that only math can reveal. And I just had to read it too because I don't know where the heck I pulled that from, but that was the best darn summary I'm going to give you for this book. This book is just the most beautiful, cozy, lyrical literary fiction that I have read in a very long time, and I am very glad that I pushed through. It really focuses on the themes of like love, family, how one chooses to express themselves. For example, like all of the different characters here really express their love for each other in different ways. The professor always ties it into math and these like inherent, intrinsic, universal truths that you can discover through mathematical equations, whereas the housekeeper tends to show her love by acts of service. She does things for people, she plans things for people, she cooks them good food. And it's a really beautiful found family story of people who are maybe a little bit oddball, a little bit out of the societal norm, and who are maybe not welcomed that much by normal society, coming together and just like really forming a very well-fitting, tightly enmeshed unit. That's a very poor description, hence I read you my notes because I felt like those were better. I also really enjoyed that while this is a story that really focuses on love, it's a familial love. It's not a romantic love between, say, like a young housekeeper and an older professor. This was very much focused on how two strangers can get to know each other deeply enough to become friends, and then from there become enough of a friend that you love each other just like they were family. And you guys know I'm a sucker for found family stories, and this is very, very, very much one of those. This might also be just a very specific thing to me, but I love when baseball pops up in Japanese novels. Baseball is so culturally huge in Japan, and it's something that I really love. And in the case of math, it's like the most statistical sport out there. So it just really intermeshed in here, and genuinely, like, they should have put that on the description because I would have kept reading just to get to the baseball. Maybe that's just like a specific thing to me, but I really did enjoy how that was like interwoven in the book as kind of a bonding point for all of the characters. And I do just want to encourage you that if you have had this book on your shelves or in your wish list for a while and you're not sure, or you like me are a little hesitant when it comes to memory loss narratives, I've had a lot of dementia in my family, so I find memory loss quite difficult to read about. This did not traumatize me at all. I could see the end coming when it inevitably did, but it came in a very peaceful, gentle way, and not at all in a way that I found triggering or hard to read once I actually like got past my fear about reading about memory loss. So I just wanted to put that out there in case that was something that was a barrier for anybody else. So in summary, this is definitely a novel I would recommend to pretty much anyone, but specifically if you are interested in literary fiction like Kazuo Ishiguro, I think you would really like this. If you are a fan of Studio Ghibli, but specifically Studio Ghibli films like The Wind Rises or Only Yesterday, I think that you would really, really like this. And if you are a fan of slice of life anime generally, I think this would be right up your alley. So I read this book for the Dewey's 24-hour readathon back in April, and that kind of kicked off like, oh, well, maybe I'm in the mood for Japanese literary fiction. So I then picked up Strange Weather in Tokyo by Hiromi Kawakami. This one is translated by Allison Markin Powell into English. And unfortunately, I did not like this one quite as much as I liked The Housekeeper and the Professor. Strange Weather in Tokyo is about a woman named Tsukiko who is in her late 30s and is kind of living a stagnant lifestyle, if you will. She goes to work, she doesn't really have friends, she likes to drink, she doesn't really have that much going for her. When she happens to stumble across one of her high school teachers at a bar and befriends him. Now this teacher is named Harutsuna Matsumoto, but for most of the novel, she only refers to him as sensei or teacher. And he was her Japanese like literature teacher essentially in high school. And they basically strike up this very, at first awkward, tentative relationship that as the novel goes on develops into a more full-fledged friendship that kind of challenges everything that they know about friendship, about love, and about like where they see their futures going. I've only read one other novel by Hiromi Kawakami. I read the Nakano Thrift Shop like many years ago at this point, but I did really enjoy that book, and so I was hoping that I would also really love this. Now I will say that the writing style is absolutely gorgeous. This is like peak literary fiction to me, and for lack of a better way to put it, it's just so incredibly Japanese to me. There's this thing in Japanese anime, television, literary fiction where it's almost like space. I'm sure there's a Japanese term for this that I just don't know, but there's just this feeling of like ambient noise in space, and being able to capture that in writing is shocking. It's the idea of saying a lot without a lot of words, like conveying a lot, conveying a good picture, conveying an emotion without having to use overly wordy or flowery language that I think Kawakami just does perfectly. So no notes on the writing style. However, what I really struggled with was so inherent, so pivotal to the book that it was not destined to be for me. So the problem I had with this book is that it is essentially an age gap romance, in which Tsukiko is, like I said, she's in her late 30s, and we can assume that sensei, or her teacher, is about 30 years older than her. So he's probably 66, 68-ish, roughly, at the start of the novel. I think it'll never not be weird to me that they met in high school, specifically because Tsukiko never refers to him by any other name than sensei. Like, the fact that she continues to call him teacher, and then when they do finally, spoiler alert, become a little more intimate with each other as the book goes on, rather than referring to Tsukiko by her name, sensei starts calling her like his lovely girl or his beautiful girl. He's never like, you're a beautiful woman. You know what I mean? And I feel like they're very stuck in their student-teacher roles. I also don't think it helps that sensei seems quite a bit older than 68 years old. In my head, he was, well, in my head, I don't know why I was picturing Hayao Miyazaki. In my head, he was like in his early 70s, but Tsukiko reads a lot younger than her late 30s. She reads like she's stuck in her teenage years, which maybe is the point because she still falls in love with her teacher. She just is such an immature main character that it just felt wrong to me. Like, the age gap never got romantic to me. It just always felt like he was still her teacher and she was still in high school, and like the relationship should not be happening. Obviously, this is a book in translation, so I can't tell you based off of the original Japanese whether, you know, the little girl reference is translated correctly or translated with an extra emphasis on the girl, or if the physical descriptors of sensei are again translated in one way or the other. I will say that it explores some very interesting themes, specifically the idea of being alone versus being with someone, and yet the difference between being alone and being lonely. I think that was definitely a central theme here. I think it also explored different forms of intimacy and like how you can truly come to know someone. Is that through conversation? Is that through just time and proximity? Is that through being physically intimate with someone? So in summary, the only people I would personally really recommend this book to would be fans of Hiromi Kawakami who are like trying to read her entire back catalog. In that case, obviously go ahead. Like I said, it's beautifully written, so you will likely at least enjoy that aspect of it. But I do think there is much more Japanese literature out there without the icky age gap romance that you can read instead. So that's just potentially my hot take. I literally have not ever seen a negative review on this book, so maybe I'm in the minority. Definitely not for me. So that was everything that I read in Q2 of 2025, and I think it's safe to say that The Housekeeper and the Professor was my favorite work of fiction from the quarter, while Hamilton was definitely my favorite nonfiction. If you have read any of these books and you would like to share thoughts with me in a comment down below, I would greatly appreciate that. Hopefully my reviews were semi-cohesive at the very least. Like I mentioned, I am very out of practice when it comes to reviewing books, so this was me kind of dipping my toe back in the water. Anyways, thank you very much for letting me ramble at you. I hope you are having a wonderful day. I hope you are reading some good things, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye.